there's a lot you can do. There's so many
Recording
possibilities.
is on.
All right. Hopefully they can see me. Kate, hello everybody. We have a special guest today, Yan Garcia, Tlamachsteca ticket of Wasteka Nahuatl, right? Yan, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you. Tlaskamati.
Tlaskamati, Pampa. Nikanit. Thanks for having me.
Yan, can you give us a brief introduction to yourself and how you started off on the journey learning Nahuatl and then teaching it?
Kena. Toka Yan. My name's John. Basically, I've been working with Nahuatl language, especially the Wasteka variety, but just doing a lot of projects with Nahuatl. Tlahtol Tapasoli, for example, is a collective I run with a couple friends. And basically what we do is try and teach Nahuatl to the community. We're located out in Los Angeles. And we just try and teach Nahuatl and have the idea to always be creating new Nahuatl teachers, other people who can also help teach the language with us. And so that's a little bit about what I do. I've been teaching Nahuatl through workshops and things like that since 2010 roughly, just at different workshops, mecha workshops. It started out with occasional classes through like the Centro Cultural in Santa Ana, for example, a community center out there. We had a class out there, and now we have the Los Angeles one. But I've been wanting to. Growing up in high school, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles, so I grew up kind of far away from where all the cultura was and all the kind of like cultural revitalization was going on. I grew up more in like the Chino area, which had more like second, third generation, more Mexican Americans, and people who had a Mexican heritage, but just had been in this country for so many generations that Spanish was no longer a thing in the homes. Just very different culture. So with that, I didn't get much exposure to Nahuatl except for books, and the books didn't get me much help because they were written for linguists and they were really advanced vocabulary and terminology, and I was an okay student, but for me at that level, it was just I couldn't get past the first chapter, so I just I was like, oh well, that was fun. But then I got an opportunity to study Nahuatl through an organization called Idioms. So that's a program that teaches Nahuatl. Run a lot of the people in it are a lot of the teachers are native speakers of Nahuatl, especially from the Wasteka. And so they had a great methodology. They worked with university professors who study pedagogy and so they had a background in in not just the language and culture that they grew up with, but methodologies on how to teach it that were really effective and really great. And so that was, I think, in the summer of 2009, and I went back in the summer of 2010, and so just spent my summers learning Nahuatl. And when I came back to the States, I was able to at least give an introduction workshop to Nahuatl in a lot of circles. And so that's since then I've just been keeping up with my Nahuatl and promoting what I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I personally been kind of watching the journey from afar and seeing all the work that you've been doing. So for me personally, I just want to thank you for that. Obviously, for many other people that would like to thank you too, because I, for one, purchased your first edition. Now we got the second edition out. Can you talk a little bit about the variant that you're focused on, and then on your book?
Yeah, so I always call it the Wasteka variety. So the Wasteka is a huge region made up of the state parts of the northern part of Veracruz, a lot of Hidalgo, and San Luis Potosi. So that whole region that speaks Nahuatl up there is what we call the Wasteka region. And for whatever geopolitical reason, social, cultural, that's where Nahuatl got preserved the most in terms of number of native speakers who didn't stop speaking. I mean, yes, Puebla is the state that has the most Nahuatl speakers. Puebla is a huge state, but the Wasteka is the single most variety that's at a really large scale. So it's so large that if you take up the whole Nahuatl from the Wasteka, it makes up about half at least
Mhm.
over half of all the Nahuatl speakers in that exist. So it's at least half of everyone. That's just in Wasteka. So I had native speakers from the central variety say, yeah, if you want to go far in Nahuatl, you even if you speak Nahuatl, you have to study Wasteka Nahuatl. Even if you speak Nahuatl from another variety already, it's like you got to learn Wasteka Nahuatl. It's not something you can't avoid. And it's interesting. Wasteka wasn't a place of much political power in during the Mexica times, during the Triple Alliance period. It was all out of Mexico City. That's the area that had all the power in the Tenochtitlan, and the Wasteka region got conquered. I think in the 1400s, got it got conquered, and it was it was big enough that the Mexica had, you know, a type of warrior class called the Cuesteca. The
Mhm.
Cuesteca class. It's a level they wear conical cone heads,
Mhm.
hats on their heads, named after the Cuesteca. But that could also be referring to the Tenec people of the Huasteca. So yeah, it wasn't a big variety from back then, but today it's huge. It's big variety. You'll find a lot of native speakers who still only speak Nahuatl and speak no Spanish out in that area. I mean, times are changing, of course, with
Mhm.
schools being placed everywhere in Mexico. But yeah, and basically the Huasteca variety, we would call it an eastern variety of Nahuatl. So
Right.
there's eastern, western, and central varieties, and we call the Huasteca an eastern variety, along with Central Veracruz, the ancient varieties spoken in Chiapas, Tabasco varieties that were in some might still be spoken, I think, in some towns, and Pipil, if you analyze it, the language from El Salvador, the
Mhm.
Nahuatl language from over there, is very similar to the Huasteca, and I think you would be able to consider it. People consider it within the branch of the Eastern varieties as well. It's just been isolated for a long time, but it's also an Eastern variety too. So a lot
Okay.
going on in the Eastern varieties.
Yeah, definitely. So, in your opinion, you would say for a person starting off, getting into learning Nahuatl, starting off with the Washteka variant, this would be a good jumping point, and they would be able to understand maybe, for example, a Guerrero variant.
Yeah. I think the Huasteca is just a great place to start off with. One reason because of the huge number of speakers it just has, you have a lot of opportunities to speak
Mhm.
now. It's more in especially in Mexico or online through social media. But the most of the Huasteca also preserves the sounds very well, so they remain mostly dominantly a TL variety sound.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas some central varieties, like in Puebla, actually drop the TL and just do a T now. Um, and so the pronunciation, and they're very strong with an O, not towards U. So I mean, O and U are kind of like the same sound in Nahuatl, but
Right.
for us as people who speak English or Spanish, we would categorize them differently. But Huasteca has that O sound very, so it sounds very similar to classical too, with the only difference being the W sound at the end of words that's different. But besides that, a lot of the grammar is very similar. It hasn't created too many new things. Um, and the only difference is with the past tense. So if anyone has studied that, the past, how you do the past tense, that's really the only big difference. But if you keep an ear out for it, you can easily learn the two patterns because it's just two patterns. You either do this or you do that. Um,
Right.
so I think it really facilitates how you learn classical now or center varieties as well
Mhm.
too. But if you go to another extreme, Guerrero could be considered one of the extremes from Huasteca, and so that extreme can be a little bit difficult, just because Guerrero is very west and Huasteca is very east. So if you study Huasteca and Guerrero, then you'd have everything in the middle would be easy too.
So you got both sides there.
Yeah, both of the extremes.
Yeah, I seen that too in my own studies. Can you talk a little bit about your book? Right now, I'm in a class. We're using your second edition. Everybody's like really excited. I love it. I think it's really straightforward for English speakers because a lot of the information is not accessible to English speakers unless you're bilingual. Can you talk about a little about your book? Give us a tip how to approach the book and how to utilize it in our learning journey.
Yeah, definitely. Um, the thing about the book and the whole reason why I wanted to do it was, like I mentioned, that a lot of the current Nahuatl books written by linguists tend to be towards for other linguists too.
Mhm.
Using all these heavily terminology, and I know to some extent you have to get into that sometimes, but I really wanted a book out there that had a lot of more simple exercises, things more broken down for everyday people who don't necessarily have a background in all this, so that anyone who wants to study now, just like you would want to study, I don't know, French or Chinese or Japanese, you could pick up a book and they try, and some the good books at least break up break everything down, and you teach one new concept, then you practice that concept, and you go for one new concept and you practice that concept, so you don't throw everything in there all at once. You want to you learn something every new chapter. So that's how I try to approach it. It's a solo project I had to do. We're not we're a bit underfunded from compared to the major companies that produce like Japanese learning books or
Mhm.
English learning books, and have all these resources to fancy visuals and pictures and fancy editing. So it is going to be lacking in some of those things, but I think the core of it, at it all, using it as a tool, I think it'd be pretty effective. Um, so yeah, I mean, going through it, you know, chapter by chapter, I would say it's a bit heavily focused on the grammar, like teaching one grammatical concept, here's one new grammatical concept, and then it's like, now practice it. Um, what someone might be lacking in that, and I try to improve it a little bit on this book, is the vocabulary and then putting it together, right? So it's nice to know what the plural of chichi is chichime, right?
Mhm.
But it's another thing to put that into practice. So I would say, whether if you're someone is studying it by themselves or in a group, to try and pluralize as many things as they can. And so don't just take examples that I gave you, but look for new examples and try and figure out what would I say. And because when you try and do that yourself, or in an exercise, then you come across these situations or new questions you didn't think about, like, well, what about in this case? What about in this case? Would I pluralize this? And that's how you really get. That's how everything sinks in. So if you're just passively reading or even just doing the exercise questions, it's good, but you got to get practice in it. Spoken if possible, verbal practice with it. And so there's all these things you could do. You could do a lot of us talk a lot about TPR, total physical response.
Mhm.
So this basically means, this is easier done obviously when you're in person. So if you have in-person classes, but this is where you would do activities that are more where you're not sitting down and taking notes, right? Where your notes are happening up in your head, and
Right.
it's more on the spot kind of thing, but it's more dynamic, right? So you're doing dynamic exercises. It's more fun. It should seem like a game. It's a learning game, right? So you want to create such an that's where the where being a teacher um, has where you have to get creative as a teacher to think, well, what kind of game can I make out of this? That's going to be somewhat fun at least, but especially effective in teaching this grammatical point. And so there's a lot of tips about how to do that, but that is one method that has already been shown to work really well in other languages, and we can use
Mhm.
that in Nahuatl as well too.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. As an English teacher, we utilize a lot of TPR too in my and what I do for a living. But so talking about tips, that goes to the next part. Next question I have. Um, you have two channels, right? One in Spanish, Canal Nahuatl, and the other one is Nahuatl channel, right?
Correct. Uh-huh.
Okay. So you're right now you're beginning the second, what would you call series of
Second series, second season. Yeah.
second season
Second
second
set.
season. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna put the plug there for your channels, both channels. I've I kind of binge watch them when I'm doing other things. They are really great. Can you talk about your channel a little bit? Like, what is it? Is it just you going through the book, or is it a little extra?
Sure. I started first with Canal Nahuatl a long time ago, and so that channel's a bit more cemented, I think, and has a lot, probably more diverse content on it because it's not just grammatical lessons, but also it's like, well, let's learn a song in Nahuatl, and here are the lyrics, and here's what they mean, or different topics like that. The Nahuatl channel I started recently because not, I put so much effort out there for people who know Spanish, but I started to realize there's a significant amount of people who are not fluent in Spanish, more in English, but still want to learn now. So I want to create another avenue for that. And also technology has improved since I started Canal Now. So the things I can do now, the
Yeah.
PowerPoints and putting yourself out there, it's much easier now too. So there's that. So with the Now channel, the main thing right now is we are going through different grammatical aspects of now. So just kind of like any channel, like if you look at how to learn Japanese or how to learn something else, a lot of the teachers out there on YouTube have will guide you from the beginning to towards intermediate levels of fluency. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. It's not necessarily the same exact order as the book is, so it's not necessarily like meant to just accompany the book, just it's an extra resource. Sometimes when you present something the same way, people won't necessarily get it, but if you present it in a different way, it'll be easier. So that's kind of how that goes. If someone has a book, they could go through the book, and if they can see the videos too, then they relearn it, but in a different way. And sometimes I teach some things earlier than I do with the book. Um, so there is that, and it is unfortunately more grammar based, which I don't like to do, but I don't have much option when it's a video out there of just going through the topics. I don't have the ability to be as dynamic because it's not a live group; it's a recorded video. There are ways to try and still improve that, so I might be looking into that. And besides that, I go through other random topics, other questions that people need to know about in for Nahuatl. Different questions about how strong is Nahuatl, what are the different orthographies, political things. So anything that has to do with Nahuatl, we'll talk about that too.
Okay. So what I think is great is that in conjunction with the book, you're getting the audio. So now you can hear how these words are pronounced because that's very, very important. The pronunciation. I think my favorite video was yours, was the fake Nawat. uh, can you talk about that? Can you give like a little precaution to people that are just like learning their, I call it TikTok Nawat, Google
Yeah.
Nawat.
Well, it's been around way longer than TikTok, but
Right.
TikTok is definitely a vehicle that is so easy to spread misinformation too. And it just amplifies you have a bad you have a bad cacao fruit pod, and it's like spreading even faster to other trees. Um, so there's that. I mean, there's a few good TikToks out there, but um, people who've done their research and stuff.
Hmm.
But it's not as sexy as saying something that's out there, and that gets people's attention.
Right.
Um, so yeah, the one tip I'd say is be very cautious. You have to be cautious. You have to enter this with some caution when you're learning now where you get your words from, if they're from native speakers. And that's one easy way to tell. Did you get this word from a native speaker or not? There's certain words that just don't exist in modern varieties.
Hmm.
Um, some words that have never existed. There's some meanings that are wrong. So you'll see all that. You'll see meanings that given to words that don't have that meaning. You'll see things that say, well, this word in Spanish comes from Nahuatl. Sometimes it starts off as a joke, like there's a joke that quesadilla comes from the Nahuatl word quesadilla, which is a joke to everyone who gets it because it's obvious. It's so obvious it's not Nahuatl.
Right.
But there'll still be people who believe it, and then it gets cemented in some ways like that. You'll find there's certain words that, like I mentioned, that don't exist that people think exist in
Mhm.
Nahuatl. There's like the whole ometeot kind of question where some things are kind of debatable, but for sure are not used in modern varieties.
Mhm.
So if you listen to native speakers instead of listening to people who don't speak now or didn't grow up in the community, then it'll be easier to verify this.
Right. That's what I think is really important because I see like on those this person they're teaching this bunch of I don't know they got like 10,000 followers and then they have this native speaker he has 100 followers. So I think
Yeah.
it's important to that we focus on the speaker, ask them, reach out and ask them. So two more questions. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're busy. Um, everybody wants to know if I study every day, how long will it take to become conversational? 1 year, 2 year, three? What do you think? What's the estimate?
That's a good question. There's a there's a lot of variation between people, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I know it was about 2 years before I started making a lot more deep connections in my head about how things work. Um, I also had a lot of interaction. So if you're getting a lot of interaction or good practice with people, um, and you and trying to use the language or words in new places every day, so you create new memories with those words all the time, because a lot of this isn't just classroom but just different experiences and memories that you create with these new words. So if you can create those as much as possible, it would make it way faster. So it can take about, I'd say at least starting point maybe 2 years. There's always like those hyper polyglots who pick up on things super
Right.
fast too.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't pick up on all the words. They just pick up on the basic conversational stuff they can say. Um,
Right.
so there's that. There are some people who do struggle more with learning language, um, and so there's some people who take a little bit longer. So yeah, it kind of depends how much time you put into it, how consistent, and what's the quality like of all those things. So if you can get your stars to line for each one of those, I'd say things are would be looking pretty good.
Okay. And last question, or second to last, and then I just want your opinion. But in regards to like the people from the Wasteka, Nawa people from there, the people that grew up speaking the language, how do they feel about everybody else learning their language? Do they look at it as like it's great? Do they say, "Oh, this is cultural appropriation"? What's the basic consensus? What do you?
I've never heard anyone from the Wasteka even think about anything like culture appropriation. People love it. People love it when people learn their language, because it's validating their experiences. It's validating that their language is really a language, because people have to understand that there's so much discrimination against native speakers.
Mhm.
It's not like you're going to the Wasteka and saying I'm a Wasteco.
Right.
Um, but when you go over there, there's almost an expectation like, well, now that you're in this town, you better be wearing your sombrero, if you want to
Right.
fit in here. So they see themselves as pretty proud of
Mhm.
that, and so there's a lot of pride that they have in that. So everyone's been pretty excited when others learn it. So when I was in the Wasteca, um, the Wasteca people genetically are not very mixed. So me, I'm more genetically mixed, a native. Uh,
Mhm.
so that's my experience. It's just my reality. So when I've gone to the Wasteca, I can stick out like a sore thumb for that. But I learned how to do the proper greetings, the traditional ones. So I'm walking on the road and I do the proper greetings to some elderly ladies, and they're like, "Thank you for saying it in Nahuatl." Like, really appreciate it. Like they were in the middle of a conversation and they paused and they're like, they took the time, pausing the conversation to acknowledge how happy they were that I'm in their town and I'm speaking their language. Because if you go to a town and you're just speaking Spanish or English, you're promoting the colonizer language there. Whereas
Right.
if you go to the town and ask them questions and interact in their language, then they're gonna be more interested. They're more more happy. Learning a language, being part of a community is speaking a language is a big thing for people trying to you know get in touch with their roots in some parts, because whatever your experiences are, people say, well, you grew up here, you grew up there, this wasn't your experience. But when you're speaking a language, you're engaging with that culture in that sense.
Okay.
You're actively participating in it, and you're creating new experiences in that culture, in that community. So
Right.
yeah, everyone's been excited. um, there's I've seen a few native speakers from other towns who only get upset when people who are like charlatans pass
Hmm.
themselves off as like shamans or leaders,
Yeah.
and pass along knowledge, and they're like, we don't say that in our town. Like, we don't have these concepts in our town. So what are you? So when their own elders are kind of put down compared to elders like in the city who don't have that same experience, that's when there can be some uh, conflict. But I haven't seen that either, even in the Wasteka either. I've seen that more in other varieties that are closer to Mexico City that deal with city people a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is because those of us that were raised in the U.S. or that are from the U.S., sometimes there's that, oh, why are you learning my language with certain groups, on this side of the border opposed to that side. So I just wanted to clarify that. The main point is do it respectfully, right?
Yeah, definitely. And when you're doing with respect, people can see that you're not trying to get anything out of it. I've had other experiences. I've also learned Mixteco, so I spent some time over there.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I had the same thing. People were very excited. I was also doing it to promote the language, help support the language, because I was in a town that's a region that's only has 3,000 speakers left. So that's it's very small for a region that used to have more. So I do recordings, and there'd be people who would say, who get when they see me recording, and I ask for permission, of course, and they're like, "Is this for you, or is this for like a video?" So there are people who want to know,
Right.
what is going on, with this dynamic. But then I explain it to them. It's just for my own thing. I'm just gonna use this to learn. Like, oh, okay, cool, awesome, and everyone else is super excited. And then people start inviting me everywhere. And they're like, "Come over here. We'll come join us over here at our house." And everyone gets really excited when they see again that you're validating their culture and their language and experience.
All right. Yeah, I agree. I've had similar experiences. Last thing, and then I'll let you go. Um, can you share with us maybe a phrase, something that you really like? Sometimes we learn words in Nahuatl, and for some reason that word really connects with us. It has a meaning. It's just, I don't know. Can you share something with us for everybody? Word, a phrase. Give us an
Sure.
explanation. Break it down.
Yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of phrases that I haven't seen. What's funny is I haven't seen many idioms the same way we would use them in English.
Uh-huh.
English has a lot of these figurative languages. Now it is more about metaphors kind of thing.
Mhm.
It's more focused on that. But there's so many everyday phrases that people use, both the respectful ones and when you're trying to, and the ones that are not respectful. And so both I think both extremes I think are pretty interesting. So the respectful way to greet people as you're passing them along is saying things like "nepania," which means it just literally means I'm going over there. But it's a phrase. It's a cemented phrase in the community. "Nepania" when you're going out somewhere. "Nepani onya," you would also say, with a little bit more respect. "Nepani onya." If it's just you by yourself, or if you're with a group of people, "Nepati onyui." Changes a little bit. "Nepati onyui." We're going over there, and yeah, it just sounds like you're telling people I'm going over there. To random people on the road as you're passing them. But for a traditional village, this greeting it's pretty ancient. Comes through a long time, and it kind of just shows you the whole purpose of it is that you're kind of explaining what your intents are. What's
Mhm.
your intent? What are you trying to do at this moment? You're trying to show people that you're friendly. You're trying to show people that you're going out to do something, and in a way, the community is also looking after you. So you're take care of you too, and look after you as a person too. And so that these phrases are very 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 important, very significant. And there's a lot more like that depending on whether you're arriving at someone's house, whether you're leaving your own house. It changes a little bit depending on how you're saying it, but that one's used for a lot of respect to people on the road. So greeting people, in Los Angeles, you don't greet people as you're passing them by. Every single person, they would look at you a little bit weird, but it's you would be seen as kind of rude to pass by someone and like, go pass by their face. Literally to pass by someone's face is the verb hispano, which is
Uh,
which which literally means to pass by their face, but what it actually means is to disrespect someone.
mm,
So amo si hispano, don't disrespect him, right? Amo si hispano, don't disrespect me. That's you have that word there, literally having a tie to passing someone through their by their face. Um, and
okay.
then on the joking side, words that people use jokingly are like tzopiloquitlac, which is the
Vulture
excrement from
shit.
a, yeah, vulture, from a vulture, the vulture poop.
Yeah.
Um, so you'll see that one used as like crap or shoot kind of thing.
Uh,
Um, and one more that is important, I'll mention because I think it's important for people to know about too, because they're gonna hear it at some point. You're gonna hear it if you go on Facebook groups from the Wasteka, or if you go to the Wasteka, the kids will tell you to say this to someone. It's gonna come up. So and even other varieties say the same thing, the same exact thing. They just change it how they pronounce it in their way.
uh,
But they always say they'll say shinechmaka mowelti to each other.
give me your sister.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Like let me borrow your sister kind of thing. And so that's like their joke, but obviously that's something you have to. It's obviously not respectful, but it's not disrespectful if you use it with the right crowd.
Right.
So know your audience at all
Right.
times. Know your audience in that
Don't
setting.
go up to
But
strangers with that one.
yeah, but that phrase tells you a lot, about uh how now what kids joke around with each other too.
Hmm. Okay.
But adults do it on social media too.
Yeah. Yeah. I seen that.
You'll see that in memes too, where they'll say like, "This means I love you," and it doesn't mean I love you.
Yeah. I've run into things like that too. People are like, it's kind of like that tattoo, where they get the Chinese Asian tattoo and it means something totally different.
Oh yeah.
That's a big problem. Okay. So I'm gonna put on here. I want to put your channel because you're doing the second series. Your book. Is there anything else? Do you have like I know you were doing the apps before.
Yeah, that's another good thing to mention. If you look up Tequesche, which is me, the author of apps, I guess you could say, I've got some apps developed more for Android because I
Okay.
at the time I was doing this, Android was more popular in Mexico, which is where I felt the biggest need was. But so these are more. There are some for the on the iPhone too, but I have one called Nahuatl Grammar,
Uh,
which is a really cool calculator. If you're learning Nahuatl, you can manipulate things like kind of like if you're like those games in Las Vegas where you pull down the lever and try and make three different rows match up. Well, it's the same concept except for grammar. So on one slide you have like the ni, ti, met, ti kind of thing. So the pronouns. On the next slot you have the object pronouns like nech or meets or ki, and on the third slot you have the verb. And so with that, when you manipulate those, and it comes out, and then it tells you what you just said, what your alignment tell what it means. So if you
oh,
align ni meets ita, it'll say, "Oh, this means I see you." But if you put uh ni nech ita, it'll say this doesn't mean anything. So
okay.
it's literally a calculator for a few phrases. It's I think the only thing we have right now with anything resembling computational um, programming for now. There's no computational translators yet that exist. I
So
pitched the idea
this is
to,
learning how to conjugate.
yeah. So there's that app, and then there's dictionary apps that are available too.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
so there is that.
Yeah, I have the question on my phone. I have Android. I'm an Android guy. So I'll try to put all those links on there too. Are you doing any like classes like you did last time where people emailed you, or is that in the future? Did you hear me?
Yeah.
You're breaking up.
I have. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any classes? I would love the chance to do more classes again. I think it was a good experience from the one we
Mhm.
had last time. Um, I wouldn't say I'm the best teacher on Zoom compared to what I've had all my experience with in live, but
Uh,
I also think Zoom has a lot of really good opportunities for teaching other material too, um, and integrating technology can be pretty positive too. I just have to find ways to get people to practice verbally.
right.
So I haven't announced anything yet, but I have that in consideration. If I were to do it, it'd probably be over a summer when I have
Okay.
a break from school.
Okay. All
From
right.
well, school I work at a school, so it'd be a
Okay.
break from my work.
From work. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jan Tlaskamati. I really appreciate this, and hopefully we can get all the information out there for English speakers so they can learn correctly. That's what the focus of this is, to learn correctly and learn from actual people that speak the language, know the language, study the language, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Okay. Well, it was nice having you, and hopefully we'll be maybe talk again in the future.
Okay, sounds good.
Tlaskamati, Timotaske.
Timotase.